This week, as we're debating the National Defense Authorization Act, we celebrate also the 72nd anniversary of D-Day, June the 6th, 1944, something that no one had ever tried before, a cross-channel landing of size and scope that previously had never been envisioned as a reality by warriors. 160,000 Allied troops, including 70,000 brave Americans, stormed those beaches. I had an opportunity a few years ago to visit the American Normandy cemetery, and as I'd had a chance to go through the cemetery with a Belgian guide who had great appreciation for everything that American soldiers had done to try to bring freedom to Europe again, and who, by the way, able to then come later and spend a summer at the World War I Memorial in Kansas City, Missouri. But we talked about the cemetery. One of my sons and one of my grandsons was with us, and they had a chance to identify the two brothers who were buried side by side, the father and son who were buried side by side, the Missourians who had given their life at D-Day. And then he set us down on this low wall with the Atlantic Channel behind us, the English Channel behind us, where the Atlantic Ocean flows in and out, and those 8,000 or so graves in front of us. And then he opened up his computer and had General Eisenhower and Walter Cronkite sitting at exactly that same place 20 years after the D-Day landing, June the 6th, 1964. And General Eisenhower, former President Eisenhower, said something like this. He said, "You know, Walter, my son graduated from West Point on D-Day. And many times in the last 20 years, I've thought about the family that he and his wife have had a chance to raise, the experiences they've had an opportunity to have, and I've thought about these young men who didn't have that 20 years because of what they were asked to do." And particularly hearing the person who ultimately was the one who asked them to do it show the responsibility he felt 20 years later for lives that were lost, and many lives were lost. Those bodies were brought back to the United States, so that Norman Cemetery doesn't even begin to reflect the lives that were lost. But when he said, "Many times over the last 20 years, I've thought about these young men and the life they didn't get to have because of what they were asked to do." Every time we debate this bill, and this will be over 50 years now of passing this bill every single year, every time we debate this bill, we should think of what those who defend us are asked to do. We should think about the men and women who are carrying on the legacy of that generation of D-Day and World War II and Vietnam and Korea and wars before that and after, and the obligation we have to be sure that they have every possible advantage in any fight. Frankly, we never want to see Americans in a fair fight. We want that to be an unfair fight. We want those who defend us to have the best weapons, the best training, the best support, the best of everything, so that they have every possible advantage when they do what they are asked to do. This bill came out of committee with 3 no votes, strong bipartisan support. It's time to get this work done, as the Senate has done for 54 straight years. This will be the 55th year. I'm particularly glad in this bill that this bill takes a new step toward recognizing the sacrifice we ask military families to make. General Ray Odinaro, the last immediate last chief of staff of the Army, said the strength of the country is in its military, and the strength of the military is in its families. And so this concludes some legislation that Senator Gillibrand and I introduced last fall that would, for the first time ever, give families more flexibility if there is a job opportunity, an education opportunity, a reason for a family. In the many times military families are asked to move, to go a little quicker or stay a little longer. If this bill passes, if this language is in the final bill and the president signs it, for the first time ever, families, without being questioned in any detail beyond whether they meet the conditions of the Military Family Stability Act, would be able to say the person serving is going to go ahead and stay as a single service person on the base for another month or 2 or 3 or 4 even, but we're going to go ahead and move right now so that the kids can start school. Or we're going to go ahead and stay a little longer so that the spouse can finish a moment in their career that makes it possible for them to continue to do what they do. Too many of our military spouses are unemployed and don't want to be, or underemployed and don't want to be, because their careers are constantly impacted. The cost of maintaining 2 residences that those families would now have to bear just makes really no sense at all. This bill allows us to move forward. The men and women of the armed forces, as well as the civilians and the contractors who support them, work every day to meet the challenge. They face more than 15 years now of active military engagements. They've made all kinds of sacrifices so that we could continue to have the freedoms that we have. The bill before us enhances the capability of the military, the security forces, the allied and friendly nations that need to have every opportunity that they can possibly have to have every advantage as we work to defeat ISIL, as Al-Qaeda and other violent extremist organizations are in a place where they are no longer a threat to us. This bill ensures that men and women in uniform have the advanced equipment they need to succeed in any future combat information. It reduces strategic risk to the nation and our military service members by prioritizing the restoration of military readiness to conduct the full range of all its activities. We need the training dollars. We need the training time. We need the airplanes that are younger than the pilots that fly them. And this legislation continues to move forward there. It also continues with comprehensive reform for a defense acquisition system that's designed to drive more innovation and ensure more accountability, to not take more time than it needs to take, but to be sure that everything is being done with the interest of the taxpayers and the security of the country in mind. Finally, this bill puts the Senate on record again against the president's plan to remove terrorist detainees held at Guantanamo Bay. We apparently need to continue to do this over and over again because somebody's just not getting it. I noticed in what I think was a front page article in the Washington Post this morning, another article about the absolute certainty that people who are freed from Guantanamo Bay over and over again enter the fight, kill Americans and our allies. The people that are there now need to be kept there. The Obama administration admitted itself earlier this year that Americans have been killed by terrorists from Guantanamo. Just days before, by the way, that admission came just days before another dozen inmates were transferred out of Guantanamo. According to the Director of National Intelligence, nearly 1/3 of terrorists who've been released from Guantanamo are either confirmed or suspected to be rejoining the fight. 1/3, and those were supposedly the detainees that could be released. Those were supposedly the least dangerous of the detainees. The people there now are clearly understood to be the most dangerous, the most likely to be back in the fight, the most likely to inspire others to be in the fight. The number of detainees released under the Obama administration who are suspected of engaging in terrorism has doubled since July of 2015, according to the Director of National Intelligence. And the President of the United States supports and appoints the Director of National Intelligence. This is not some outside person suggesting things that the Obama administration wouldn't want to hear. This is their Director of National Intelligence and ours. What we need is a president who has a real plan to defeat terrorism, but this bill, while this bill can't ensure that, this bill does provide the tools to defeat our current terrorist enemies and continue to secure our liberty. The number one job of the federal government, Mr. President, is to defend the country. The number one job of those of us in the Congress is to be sure that those who defend the country have what they need to defend the country, and that those who have served have every commitment that's been made to them fulfilled, and then some. It is time, Mr. President, to pass this bill to, for the 55th straight year, do what we should do for those who serve and protect us.